Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abby.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
Hey, friends. Justin here.
And not Abby.
And not Abby. Who is it? Who is it?
Rachel.
Rachel. If you guys have been listening for any amount of time, you have gotten an opportunity to hear Rachel. And some of you have done like Living Fully Alive, and she's in there. And she's also one of our master consultants who is teaching.
Master of all things.
Master of all things. She teaches our school. She's an emotional health nerd.
True.
And we love that about her. And she's such a ball of compassion and empowerment.
Oh.
Yeah, which, by the way, I've noticed, because like if you haven't seen Rachel in person or experienced her in person.
Bummer for you.
Yeah. She's like the sweetest human being. And you're like, oh, she's so wonderful. And you are. And then you have this empowerment thing that comes out and goes, let me hold you accountable. And that is so beautiful to see the blend that you carry.
Oh, thank you.
Because you're not a pushover, but I believe probably in the past you were.
Oh, 1,000%. Yeah, I was a people pleaser.
Extraordinary.
101. Oh, yeah. Had all those people pleasing tools. But I do think like it has a lot to do with how you guys have loved me. Like I think I've been loved in a way that is both very compassionate and accepting, and also paired with a lot of truth telling.
Yeah.
And I think that some of the most powerful, like life-shifting moments that have happened for me have been sort of an experience with both of those at the same time, where I felt radically loved, and someone was like, also, I believe in your capacity to grow, and I believe in your capacity to work through this and overcome something really challenging in this moment.
Right. It's like that conversation that, you're not fragile.
Yeah.
And your experience matters that you've had, but you're not fragile, and you're a capable human being. One of the things that I was talking to Paul Young the other day, and I was processing a big pain point inside of my life, and something that I think I'm on the verge of needing to confront with somebody. And, he talked about, he said, this is a brilliant thing that he communicated. He said, a lot of people want to speak truth in love, and in speaking truth in love, the focal point is truth, and love is secondary. And we can be more concerned with the truth than the delivery of the truth. And he said, but when we want to speak in love, the truth, that's a whole different ballgame. And I think that one of the things that for a lot of the work that I've done within my office and stuff like that, I've wanted to, in love, speak the truth. I've wanted to see them. I think that when we are in a heart posture of, I actually care about this human being, and I see the condition of their story, and their story actually makes them make sense.
100%.
I can come from a level of challenge that isn't from a judgment.
Yeah.
Of like, well, I'm judging your life, and here's the truth. And the truth is still the truth, but it's rooted in the judgment of how you're walking out. Whereas in love, speaking the truth, we actually sit back and go, oh, I don't have judgment about this. I see your humanity, and I'm calling you into the truth of your being from that place.
Yeah. And it's a me too, right? Like,
yes.
I think the truth is when I can also see myself in somebody else's story, and I'm like, we're in this situation. Like, I'm here with you in this. Also, I can just see how I could have 100% been exactly where you are.
And gotten there.
100%.
And that takes, I think I can speak for me, and I think that this would resound for you, but I'm considering so often the messiness of my humanity. Like when somebody tells me their story, I'm like, absolutely. Yeah. I've been there 1,000%. I've made those messes. Yeah. I've had those emotions inside. I've said those terrible things outwardly, or 1,000%. I've wanted to, or I can see how you get there, because if you push me just a little bit further, that would have been how I acted out.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
That feels really real.
And I think that that's a good tee up for today, because Abby's out of town right now. She's returning today, but Rachel was so kind to come join me, and she's going to share a part of her story that I think is vital to like how she's actually walking things out now. We're going to go back into her history a little bit, and then we're going to take some time really looking at, I would say common humanity in a lot of ways. I mean, that's a lot of it. And it comes into common humanity with regards to not only really understanding and seeing the people that we've felt pain with, but those intimate relationships, how they've ended up in our judgment. We continue to perpetuate
100%
and replicate similar behavior.
Yeah.
And I want to get into like how that affects us, how that affects our world, how we have to get down to places of acceptance, because a lot of times, again, we all have experiences in relationships, whether it's with authority figures, family members, parents, where pain comes out of that.
Yeah.
And we find ourselves very much in a reactionary position saying, I never want to be that and I never want to do that.
And then we always do.
Mm-hmm.
Or in some way, even in our avoidance of trying to be that, we become another version of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to get into that because this actually helps settle ourselves. Like this conversation helps us as individuals get back to compassion for ourselves, love for ourselves, healing and restoration inside of our own stories. So,
and I think opens up the door for a more connected, like, feeling of love towards the people that have harmed us as well.
Yes.
It like broadens our own capacity to love. Because I think if we can begin to reconcile within ourselves that judgment piece that you're talking about, it then sort of expands our ability to be like, oh, also that person who hurt me.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I feel a little bit more love towards them too.
I think one of the aspects, what was I going to say about judgment? I think we believe that if we hold on to enough judgment, like we're convinced that it'll protect us. It'll protect us from their behavior and it'll protect us from becoming that thing.
Ain't that the truth?
And that's something that I want to get into. So anyways, let's hear about your story because you have a pretty wild ride. There's a few components of how your childhood unfolded.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
in the beginning, there was
Rachel. Well, we can probably start with the beginning, really, which was that I've heard different stories over the years, but the story that I grew up with was that my parents had 3 children and they were in Thailand as professional Christians, i.e. missionaries is what I like to call them. And they sort of were like, the version I heard was that they were kind of done having kids. Like 3 is enough. We're out. We're capped. And then my mom ended up having a dream where I won't go too into details about the dream, but she basically got from that dream that they were supposed to have another kid and they were supposed to name that child Rachel. And so I came into being with some pressure of like, you are God's child. You are the one. I am a
miracle child.
I am the miracle child.
I have been sent forth into this world.
Totally. And similar to Abby, like that whole like miracle child concept. But I would say like
no pressure whatsoever.
Totally. Well, the messaging that I received was this feeling of like, God knew that we were at our capacity with 3 and we couldn't handle any more. So we just knew if we were going to have you, then you were going to be like the easiest angelic child. Like you would be the one that isn't hard because God wouldn't give us a hard kid.
No more difficulty.
We're already at challenge,
Yeah, we already feel like we're suffering here.
Totally. And, all the theological and stories that we have about our life when we're in a lot of pain and trauma, which is what my parents were in. They were in survival mode
kind
and
of some
had a
hyper spiritualizing and
totally. Yeah. So that was a lot of the context of sort of like what I grew up believing about myself, which is
also as a side note, I just want to be like, people are like, I don't know, it's just God told us and miraculously it happened. I'm like, what, are you the Virgin Mary? Like you kind of chose this. Like you felt like
Well, you did have sex to the sorry to all the children out there listening to the podcast.
Yeah, we did get ourselves into this situation, which, as a side note, I think that when people are spiritualizing stuff, they rarely think that I'm an active participant in co-creating this circumstance, that have that mindset.
Totally. Yeah.
But anyways,
that's true.
As you were saying.
As I was saying, gosh, Justin, just interrupting me.
This.
Wow. No, it's great. But so I kind of grew up feeling that was my sort of purpose in life, for lack of a better term.
Be the good kid.
Was to be the good kid, be the kid that was easy, be the kid that never rocked the boat, and that like somehow brought like meaning to everybody's lives. Which is kind of synonymously like sad and maybe a little bit arrogant. Like I'm the one that's like, I'm the one that will bring meaning and value to this family unit. And so, yeah, I was the last of 4 kids, and we were in Thailand, was the country that I was raised in. And it was a pretty, just a wild dynamic just even being there. Like, I think it's hard to describe what just growing up in a sort of more third world country is like. But there was just a lot of intensity. There was a lot of like chaos around me. There was a good deal of just like fear and anxiety about my own sort of safety in the world. Yeah.
Because were you guys living pretty impoverished in that situation, or what was that like? Like when
we actually felt like our house itself was in a pretty like well-to-do, stable area. Okay. So like a lot of the anxiety that I felt probably was a little bit more of a reflection of how in fear my mom was being there. So she had like a lot of terror that like something really bad was going to happen to us. And I also would say, you know, I was surrounded by people who had history of like ex-sex working and like surrounded by people who have had like very dramatically horrible things happen to them. And so, you know, there's something interesting to be said about like how as a kid you can kind of like absorb what is happening in the environment. And that is a lot of what I felt like. I absorbed a lot of the
energy, the emotional bandwidth that was there.
The energy of like we're all in survival, and at any given moment something could come up and blow our life up.
Complete disaster. Yeah, I know what that feeling of like doomsday is right around the corner.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And, you know, maybe we'll get kidnapped. Maybe we'll get like sex trafficked. Who knows?
Casual day as a missionary.
Totally. So my mom had a lot of anxiety, but also, so it was kind of odd because she had a lot of anxiety, like also interwoven in her own personal struggles. Mm-hmm. But the way that she sort of managed her fear was to kind of collapse and shut down. So she had a lot of anxiety, but also neither of my parents had any like parameters or rules for us at all. So I sort of always felt afraid that I wasn't going to be okay. But I also just like went out and did things on my own all the time, which is like a very strange sort of interesting how you can have those both at the same time.
Yeah.
But like I just went over and hung out at like strangers' houses all the time. And there were just like neighbors who were just strangers who would just invite me in and be like, hey, do you want to come in and have dinner? And I'm like, sure. And I'm just like with, just people that I randomly met. That is not being supervised at all.
That's wild. Also, your socialization skills as a young kid to be able to just go talk is fascinating to me. And it's also fascinating that everyone just protected you and stuff like that.
Yeah, I do think there was a lot of like protection of God that was involved. Like there was a lot of opportunities for really shady things to happen.
Absolutely.
Very much. But I do actually think that that's a pretty common thing. When you're so scared, you end up just disassociating and not caring anymore. I think that's a lot of what happened. I felt so much anxiety, but then past a certain point that I was like, well, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die. Like that was like kind of the feeling. So yeah, I just sort of lived a little bit more free range. And then, you know, my mom was always pretty unpredictable emotionally. She had really low lows and then would have swings of high that sort of looked like wanting to change our life. Like she'd be like, we're going to move to Tuscany and da-da-da-da-da. Or we're going to like rearrange the whole house and I want to paint all of the rooms different colors or like things. She just had more highs that were like unpredictable, and this feeling of like, let's go change our whole life right now.
So probably a whole lot of emotions that she didn't know what to do with internally in trying to, am I reading this right? Like, I need something outside of me to change to make something feel better that was maybe unpredictable. Is that maybe true? Or?
Totally. And I mean, later on, she was diagnosed with bipolar, which then made these swings track and made sense, which is that she'd have sort of like very low depressive states and then would have sort of high swings that were a little bit more like I am like ping-pongy and like have high energy and also like want to go change everything and make dramatic shifts about our life. And one thing about, you know, not to make broad sweeping statements about bipolar, but sometimes you can get lack of sense of self. So you kind of feel like if I can sort of gain a sense of self by like making my external life better a little bit. And so I was sort of along for the ride for a while about this, but didn't understand what was happening. I didn't know what bipolar was, obviously.
So you're just on a whiplashing like roller coaster that's like woo, 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 back and forth, kind of like, okay, totally. I guess I'm just in this. Here we go.
Totally. And then as a kid, what I sort of did with that information was I tied it, as all children do, to me.
Yeah, I must be the problem. What am I doing here?
I am somehow creating these emotional swings, which again, I have like, this is how childhood works, which is that you take your external environment and you're sort of gaining information about who you are as a person based on what you're observing around you. And so I was sort of like, man, I have a lot of power.
Yes.
I can make someone really happy and really sad.
Yeah.
And when mom is really sad and doesn't want to live anymore, it's my job then to make sure that she's happy and safe and feels good again.
Isn't that a horrible feeling? Like I know that feeling intimately well of internalizing, like I have to make this situation better. And I am not set up for success to be able to even do that.
Yeah, it's so overwhelmingly, like pressure. There's just no, I always sort of felt like it was like wearing a suit of armor that was like for a grown adult as like a little kid, that I just felt crushed under the weight of the role that I was trying so hard to play. Which was basically to be everything for my mom. Try to be your spouse, try to be your best friend, try to be her God. And obviously no little kid can fill those roles for
not
another
even remotely.
adult.
You know, and as a side note, one of the things that for me and like so many clients that have had experiences like that, you end up feeling like a perpetual failure.
100%.
Because you've been given the impossible task in that scenario, which is make someone feel a certain way and fix all these things. And when you can't because you're out of control, then you're like, there must be something flawed inside of me that I couldn't do this job that was unconsciously assigned to me.
The way you're describing it feels so true to me as far as like the feeling of continual defeat. Like I think there's something that happens in your soul where you like keep pushing up against an impossible task over and over and over and over and over again. Yeah. And then at some point your soul just feels so just defeated in everything that you are. Yeah. And so I think that was a big part of my cycle. So I tried so hard to be the good kid and the one that regulated everybody else and the one that made everybody happy. And then inevitably, as you normally do when you try to do an impossible task for what feels like 1,000 years, you have a long crash.
Yes, you do.
So I had my first like real mental breakdown when I was 11, which sounds maybe strange to some, but I had a lot of stress by the time
Isn't
I was
that wild?
11
years old. I had a mental breakdown at 11.
Yeah. And so I was pretty much like in bed, couldn't get out of bed, couldn't get enough care in my world to engage with the world around me, and was pretty much just in deep depression and wanting to die from that point.
Right. Overwhelming stress ball.
Yes. Yeah. So then I had suicide ideation pretty quickly in my life. So around that point I was like, And again, it's that sort of sequence of events, right? Like I try to do this impossible task forever. I then feel defeated. I feel worthless as a human.
Yeah.
I feel like if I couldn't do the job that I was literally put on this planet to do, which is to make everybody happy, why am I even here?
Yes.
God, just take me was how I felt.
That resonates with my story completely.
Yeah.
The verbiage of that.
Yeah.
My childhood. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Totally. So that was like my first experience. And then I had a few, like something would happen in my life and I'd sort of be like, okay, I can like engage with life a little bit more. Like a new friend would come in or something positive would happen. And then I would sort of do the same cycle over and over, which then I'd be like, okay, this new friend is here. And then I'd treat that new friend like my mom, right? Like I got to make them like me and I got to make them happy and I got to be perfect and I got to not make any mistakes. How do I do that to make sure that I don't ever fail again? And then inevitably I would fail.
Absolutely.
As it is to try to make everyone like you all the time and not make any mistakes. And then I'd have another sort of crash.
I can imagine that so many people as they're listening could relate where they're like, I'm always trying to make people like me. I'm always trying to make people happy.
Oh my gosh, what an exhausting thing to do.
Oh, it is very exhausting.
For sure. So, and I think now looking back, I have a lot of like, I was like needing secure attachment so bad. Like I was needing someone who felt like consistent and stable and who would parent me. And what I was doing ultimately was what I did with my mom, which is this concept of like, if I can help you be happy, I will finally get a parent. And I've been waiting for
what I need.
I will finally get what I need, and I think that's the thing about codependency is always we feel very, what's the word, altruistic.
Mm-hmm.
Like we feel very like, I'm doing this wonderful, loving thing. But really, if we look at it, it's like the little kid in us being like, I really wanted a mom.
That's true.
Please take care of me, somebody.
I had to, acknowledge that I was a little bullshitter years ago, where I resonate with every part of it. I was lying to myself about a lot of stuff. Like, I was like, no, I remember in college, I'm just trying to love people. No, I want to make sure that they're good in their heart. So they're safe so that I can be safe so that, totally. I can be okay, which is totally understandable. When you have so much pain and mess, you're just like, I just want safety and I don't want to feel alone. And I want to feel like I can trust you, but I can't trust you because you have these issues. So
100%. Yeah. I think we all need parenting.
Yeah.
It feels just true. We never grow out of the part. Like, I think there's always a part of me that sort of needs parenting continually that I just learned to meet inside of myself more and more and more as the years go on. But so I had multiple breakdowns, and then eventually I got into a counselor pretty early on. So actually not eventually. Pretty early on I got into a counselor, and then my mom got diagnosed with bipolar, which did create some clarity for me. Right.
Like there's something happening here. This isn't normal.
Yeah. And I remember the way that she described it to me was always a little bit, it was a moment that stick in, the moments that stick in your mind. She's like, this is what I struggle with. She says, there are like days that I just am so happy that I just want to dance on the tables and be like totally excitable and like, wild. And then days that I just like want to crawl under the table and not be here anymore.
Wow, what a great way to articulate that.
And I was like, yes.
You're like, yep.
That has been also my experience from the outside looking in. So there was some validation, but also like, okay, now what? I don't really know how to orient to that.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I have some information.
Yeah, information can at least be helpful so that we can start recategorizing how we frame it in our brain.
Yeah.
It can begin a process, maybe a while, but.
Yeah, I think so. Like it gave me more context, which I think that our bodies need context to feel a little bit more at ease. Mm-hmm. But I think also what I took from that, which was my own interpretation, which was basically like, okay, so you really can't be my mom, was like what I understood.
You're really going to be incapable here.
Like, you're really incapable. Then I've had suspicions of that, but now I'm like, sure.
Confirmed.
Confirmed, which is, my bias towards being independent anyway and try to help everybody else. So I was like, this is solidifying what I've always been concerned about.
Yes.
And so then I just sort of withdrew more and more and more and became more and more and more isolated and more like, screw it. I'm not going to need anybody ever. That's the safe way to be.
Oh my gosh. Again, I identify fully with that.
Totally.
I don't need anybody.
I don't need
good.
it. Yeah. And what a more safe, it felt more safe to be that way, right? Like,
yeah,
I then can't experience perpetual disappointment.
Totally.
Yeah.
I definitely set up inside of my head, you're all idiots. Like, my judgment went to, you're all idiots. I'm smarter than all of you. I can't trust all of you. I'm better on my own. Right? Like, that was the narrative.
Well, I think I kind of went Ice Queen. I was like, I'm going to be unaffectable. And one thing I did do, when we were talking about like how we decide we're going to really not be the thing we judge. Yeah. With my mom's highs and lows, I was like, I will just not have any feelings.
Yes.
That will be what I do. I become the best at having no emotions. I'll ice over and look how unaffected I can be, like unaffectable I can be by all of this. I can be the one person who experiences all of this chaos around me, and I'll be just like totally fine.
That was, that again, a similar of like, I'm unaffectable.
Totally.
I don't care.
Yeah. I got it. I'm fine. I'm fine on my own. This is fine. This is totally fine.
Self-sufficiency is a monster that really gets bred inside of that stuff. I talk to people about the difference between self-sufficiency and being capable. Self-sufficiency is this idea that I can go isolate myself on an island and cut myself off from connection to people and survive. Whereas being capable, because it's actually helpable. It's actually good to be capable. Like, I am able to do this stuff, and yet I make an invitation for people to participate in my world. And in that participation, I thrive.
Oh yeah.
So it's not that I become an incapable mess, letting go of self-sufficiency, but I actually had to let go and acknowledge, like, self-sufficiency is actually is just a way of talking about isolation.
Totally.
I isolate.
So true. And I think, what's so funny is trying so hard to be self-sufficient often then ends us up in breakdowns where we then
1000%.
Really need help.
Desperately need help.
Yes. So that's kind of what happened to me, which is that I was like, fine, I will be icy. This is my next strategy to handle what is happening. And this is very childhood. Like, you just sort of try something.
Yes.
And then you feel like, this isn't working. And then you try something else. So I tried the self-sufficiency thing, which then eventually rendered me pretty incapable to do anything. Yes. So I was really depressed again. So I had some functionality when I was trying really hard, and then I crashed again. And then that is when my parents felt pretty powerless of like what to do, was sort of like what I've learned in hindsight. At the time, it didn't quite land like that, which is that they were like, hey, you feel like you're really struggling, so why don't you not live with us anymore? Which I was 15 at the time and about to turn 16. And they gave me two options. My dad gave me two options. My dad was the sort of the hammer in this situation.
Was he?
He was the one who was like, hey,
It must have been really bad if they're like, here's two options, kid.
Yeah. I mean, I was pretty non-functioning. I will say that feels true. Like,
it must have felt scary for them.
Yeah. I think, they hadn't had a kid who'd done that.
Yeah.
Up until what I had done. And they hadn't had a kid that just like wanted to lay in bed all day and not function, And so my parents were scared about that for sure. And definitely didn't have the tools to handle that.
What were the two options?
Thanks for tracking. The two options were boarding school or you can move to America. And I had some friends who had been in boarding school, and it was a lot. From my very good kid perspective, I was like, it looks like they do drugs over there. Was my perception of like, it looks like they're all having sex and doing drugs and looks like a wild, wild time. So no thanks. I'll go to America where all the Christians are, was a little bit of my perception of what would be the safer option for me, which I do think, when you grow up sort of like boundaryless, like my parents just sort of let me be free, you can kind of become really rigid about like wanting to protect yourself, because you're like, no one else is going to protect me if something bad happens. So I got to think about like all the variables. What are the risks to my safety? Right. And at that point, I really felt like boarding school would be way more risky for me than America. So I was like, sure, I'll go to America.
Where to in America? I'm just...
Yeah, so
here's a plane ticket and find a spot to go and best of luck.
Yeah, so I did know some people here in Redding, California.
Interesting.
And there had been some people who were very kind to me and generous towards me. Oh. Because we'd had like different teams that had come.
Oh, so people had visited to kind of participate in the missionary stuff.
Yeah. And so I had some real positive associations with like people who would come from Bethel, the church here. And I was like, those people seemed nice. And they seemed to be caring and loving. I could probably go to Redding. So I moved in with a family that I met on the internet that I had never talked to before. And this is just to give you some context. First day there, my parents like sign over the rights of everything to these random strangers because I'm a minor, right? Like I'm 16. It's like a week. It's like I think it's like a month after I turned 16 by the time we got there. And my mom is going to stay there for a couple of weeks to like make sure everything's okay.
So she comes over with you. She comes over. Like, oh, okay, check it out. These people aren't crazy. And...
Yeah, I don't know if it was a couple of weeks or a couple of days. I don't actually remember now that I think about it, but she was there. But it was like the first night we were there. It was this couple that I didn't actually, I never met before, and there were some things happening in their lives that we had no context for at the time, and so then we'd bring out the papers to basically be like, here's your child.
Shut up. Did they know they were getting into that?
I think so. Now, thankfully, I don't think they were guardianship papers. They were just like, rights to things. Like, if Rachel needs this, you can do this.
Right. If she's at the hospital, you have a right to.
Totally. And
all that stuff.
All of that, which was just like a wild scenario.
That's bananas. As a side note, like for them, what a wild risk on their end. Like, yeah, let's do this.
Sure.
I think we're fostering a kid and we didn't realize it.
Which was very hilariously true. And then I stayed there for a little while. And I think they were like, we didn't really understand what was happening with this other kid. She seems not okay, i.e. me. And so eventually I did end up moving in with a different family who there was a mom there and there was like 8 other kids that were in that family.
Wow.
But she was lovely. She was like, my joy and delight of my life is to be a mom. Mm-hmm. And so they sort of helped me in getting sort of recalibrated to what it's like to be here in the States, and sort of like we're my little substitute family until I was an adult.
Really? From like basically 16 to 18 or something?
Yeah, 16 to 18. And then I think there was like a 6-month period that my parents came in and my dad helped me finish some stuff with my education, because I had done like, I don't know, a year of high school total.
Which is crazy because like you're like to say you did a year of high school, you're such a well-educated human being. And
thanks.
So intelligent and
thank
wise.
You. I am a little nerd, and I always think that it's so funny how when you don't always have the best like educational experience, sometimes you can feel a little bit like imposter syndrome, which can sort of throw you into overcompensating with knowledge.
Yes.
And that's 100% what I did. So Justin's referring to like what it's like to be in a conversation with me, which is like, every 3 sentences, I'm like, there's a study about and the statistic about this is da 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 da. So yeah, that definitely was in play.
Yeah. So you ended up navigating through that, and going back really quickly, like, it sounds like your experience within your household was like, how would you generalize that now? Sum that up. Like the things that I never wanted to become.
The things that I never wanted to become that then I inevitably became was, I think, probably the greatest pains of my life was, that very unpredictable, for my little kid, very scary experiences with my mom's high-low emotions. I think that what was happening around me was really hard as well, like just the context of being in a third world country. But I also think that, when you also don't feel safe in your attachments, it can really compound that experience in a especially hard way. And I think the things that I really judged in my mom was this sort of inability to regulate her emotions. It was like, why can't you just be fine? Like, I need you to be fine so bad. Why is that something that you can't be, And that sort of ups and downs, and I really villainized emotions from that experience, because I was like, sadness seems horrible. Joy seems horrible. And any strong emotion feels like it'll just like come in and ruin my life.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's how it felt.
Can't trust
to me.
any of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it all feels unpredictable and unreliable, and like a way to hurt people.
Yeah.
And so, again, it's the thing that you judge is the thing that you then become. My life then became run by my emotions because of my own inability to cope with what was happening, right? Like, that whole concept of like feelings demand to be felt. They like make themselves be heard, whether you want to hear them or not. And, in the same way that my mom exploded her life in some ways because of her inability to figure out how to go inside and regulate her feelings, I did the same thing. And that is how I ended up where I ended up in adult life. And then I won't go into it too much, but then I then had a second really major breakdown later on in life, which I've talked about on the podcast before.
Right.
When my husband and I moved in with my mother-in-law, and then she died of ALS, and then I had a really big PTSD episode, which then became, again, my emotions are running the show.
Absolutely.
My husband is now organizing his life around trying to not give me panic attacks.
Yeah.
My husband is now me in this situation in childhood. He's not wanting to, he's walking on eggshells. He's trying to make me happy. He's trying to soothe all my pain. I am now what I judge the most. And the pain of that on the inside of me felt very intolerable at the time. Like, I have become very incapable. I am now not offering anything that I think is good to offer anymore. Like, when I had PTSD, I no longer could be the good kid. I no longer could be the soother of everybody else. I was pretty self-absorbed in my own emotions.
Did you feel like you hated yourself for that?
Oh, 1,000%. Yeah.
Because, when we have judgment towards other people, right?
Yeah.
And we're replicating that same behavior, that judgment, there's usually an aspect within judgment of rejection. And there's within that also an aspect of hatred. Like there's some level of like, I hate you. I hate what you did to me. I hate this behavior. Why would you do this to me? There's a blend of all kinds of stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, when I am acting in those behaviors, I now have to not only judge myself, but hate myself as well inside of it.
Oh yeah. Like your own rules of what is good or bad.
Yes.
Then when you are the thing you deem as bad, it's like you come under the weight of all of that judgments that you've had previous. And it just felt debilitating to me. Like, I think that we avoid and we push away and we fear basically like any experience where we don't think our sense of self will be able to like handle that.
Yeah.
And I didn't think that my sense of self could handle being like my mom. Like so much of my life was organized around that thing feels wild, and that thing feels horrible.
Yes.
And I'm going to do everything I can. I'm going to willpower myself into never being that. And then, that experience of finding yourself being that. I think this is why I have so much compassion on parents, because that's that beautiful cycle, right? Like you are hurt when you're a kid.
Yes.
You judge what has hurt you.
Yes.
You then inevitably become the thing you judge. And then there is like a reconciling that happens within your own soul, where you can either learn to like tolerate the discomfort of that experience for long enough to forgive yourself.
Yes.
And learn how to turn towards yourself and not against yourself. Or you can spend a lot of your life resisting that reality.
Yes.
Like, I don't know how many of us have heard this of like, no, like I'm not a bad parent. I'm a good parent. Or like for me with my husband, I was like, no, like I'm not a bad spouse. I'm a good spouse. Right. Like, and had to protect all of the ways that I wasn't like my mom, like, no. I love my husband. I'm better than all of those things.
Yes.
And for me, really the turning point was when I could be really honest and be like, actually, the thing that I judge is also the thing that I am. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately, how I feel like I told Justin this before we got on the call, but I was like, I now feel like maybe the greatest or one of the greatest redemptions of my life is not all of the ways that I'm like healthier than my mom or better than my mom, or have found a way to have a different way of being in the world than her, but is like all the places that I'm actually exactly like her and have learned to not turn against myself about it. Like all the places that I can feel the depth of how easy it would be to self-hate over certain things. Like it is very easy for me to like be very, have a lot of self-hatred for any time that my emotions take over or any time that it feels like my trauma is dominating a conversation or my trauma is sort of taking away from someone else's experience. It's like what it feels like, and then still learning to be like, oh, but also I can still learn how to embrace love over the thing that I have found to be the thing that I have found to be worthy of judgment.
Yes.
And I think that that's like the divine cycle of life, is that I then learn to forgive within myself the thing that I couldn't forgive in someone else in growing up. And then in practicing learning to forgive that in my own self, I'm able to offer that.
Well, it's interesting because all the places where I'm spending time judging someone who's violated me or I felt violated in that relationship, or judging myself for the way that I've replicated the same behavior is all time and energy that's taken away from actually nurturing the thing that's broken within me.
So good, Justin.
Right. And so we can spend all of our time being reactionary, being like, I just don't want to be that. And they did this. Or we can go, oh, what were the repercussions of that? And how do I care? How do I take care of this thing? And how do I matter of fact, judgment also is busy trying to almost in some ways make it known that I have pain. Let me tell you how bad you are. This is how bad you hurt me. This is how much I don't want to be like you. Yeah. Instead of saying, this is how much pain I have.
Ooh, so powerful.
This is how much love I'm needing. And so again, when we're in the middle of doing that, we're just robbing ourselves of the vital thing, of the understanding. Like I can continue to focus on someone else, or I can start to listen and try to understand my story. What is the condition of Justin's experience? Yeah. What does he need? And being able to say, like, I mean, you're talking about loving those parts of ourselves and forgiving those parts of ours. That is miraculous, and it is beautiful, and it is so powerful to be able to be like, yeah, And me too.
Me too.
Me too.
Yeah.
I do that too.
Yeah.
I've replicated that.
100%.
I act out in these ways that are similar. I have survival techniques. Me too.
Yes.
And I create pain
Yeah.
for people. Yeah, me too. And I forgive myself.
Mm.
And I can see that person was trying so hard, just like I was trying so hard to heal the condition of the brokenness inside of me.
Yeah.
Like everyone who acts out, like I guarantee your mom inside of those spins, those up and down cycles, there was a monster that said, I'm destroying my family.
Yeah.
I'm hurting my children. Something, whether it was cognitive or unconscious, but that monster is chewing away inside of herself. And we all have that when we are participating inside of a reactionary, destructive behavior. Something deep inside of us is saying, oh, I don't want to do this. I can see the mess that I'm making. Even the most narcissistic people are only narcissistic because that shame monster is so enormous internally.
Big.
It's so big that they dissociate and say,
totally.
Nope, fine, don't see any of it.
Yeah.
They deny it all because it's so painful, the reality of what they're doing, and they're so tormented by it.
Yeah, that feels so true.
One of the things that I've watched people that, how do I put this? I've observed people around the area of complex PTSD having conversations where they are championing, I think that's the way you say it. The idea of like, it's your right to not have to forgive. You don't have to forgive. You've already been ran over. And if you go the rest of your life and never forgive that person, that's totally okay. And there is nothing bad about that. Yeah. But that does not lead us. And what they don't understand in trying to finally have their freedom, their free will back, their being able to create whatever boundary that they want, that they're actually hanging themselves further. And they're scared because like when you have a conversation around that with people who are in that type of trauma and you say like, hey, actually the fullness of your restoration is found within forgiveness. They're saying, so you're telling me I have to let this person off the hook and that it's all okay. And they don't like, the true reality of forgiveness is found within taking an account of the debt, right? The debt that someone else has created, the debt that we've created inside, like being honest, as a matter of fact, this debt exists. 100%. I created this debt. Yeah. They created this debt and we cannot pay it back. It is so enormous, the debt that some of us have created in someone else's world. And even if it wasn't that big, we can't eliminate the debt inside of someone else if they won't allow the debt to be eliminated. And so it's just acknowledging part of forgiveness is there is a real debt here. Yeah. And I want to release myself through from the judgment that will only torment me by both seeing the condition of my humanity, seeing the condition of their humanity, no matter how ugly and vile it is, being able to go, there's something within that. Before they were that broken mess of destructiveness, they were but an innocent child, just like myself. Yeah. And that doesn't mean that there's not accountability. That doesn't mean that there's not boundaries. That doesn't mean that there's not whatever. Yeah. But it's like, then I can go, and there's a reason that I'm this way. And there's a reason that I act out in ways that go against all of my value system, that I would never want to hurt someone in this way. And yet I did. Totally.
Yeah. And I think like what I love about what you're saying so much is I think one of the biggest like leverages that I have to forgiveness is like my own liberation, like you're saying, but also this kind of humility that is like, I know what it's like to need forgiveness. Yeah. And even in this sense of like within whatever I've perpetuated in my own soul towards my own self, I need forgiveness for that. Like there's a real human on the inside that I have not known how to love perfectly and that I've abused and that I have been cruel to. And my soul, like I need forgiveness from me is in one end. And then I really do think there's a humility that comes when you're like, I also need forgiveness. I need forgiveness from God. Like I feel connected to that. Like, and I actually think like a lot of our lives when we're trying so hard to be good, which is the story of my life, as y'all have heard, it's like we rob ourselves of the experience of forgiveness because we're trying to avoid needing forgiveness so bad.
Yeah.
Trying to avoid being like, no, I didn't make mistakes. Like, no, I was really good. Like, no, I'm trying really hard. No, I have all of the best intentions. Like, you know, all the places that we try to protect ourselves. And I just think now I'm like, oh, I need forgiveness so bad. Yeah. And I know what it's like. It's like I know the feeling of needing to be forgiven. Yeah. And so because of that, now I feel so much more compassion for the people that have hurt me. Because I'm like, me too. Like you're saying, like, I know what it's like to need forgiveness. I also need forgiveness. Like you and me. We both have done things.
Absolutely.
You know, and often the same thing. And maybe in slightly different variances.
Yes.
But the same thing.
Yeah. It's interesting because I've harped on the conversation around near-death experiences and the idea that a lot of the individuals that have come back from the other side and their perspective, you know, one of the things that I've shared before on this is that they consistently have that conversation about having some form of a life review. I grew up in an institutional system that was like, one day you're going to review your entire life. Stand before God. Yeah, you will have to answer for the shit you've done.
And you will be judged.
Yeah. Oh, thunder and fire. And
relatable.
But, you know, the conversation that they have is that when these life reviews were taking place, they consistently experience this sense of the person that's with them or the guide that's with them or whoever's there with them. And that is it doesn't have any judgment. It's just like, hey, let's take a look into your life.
Yeah.
The beauty of where we partnered with love and the impact of that on yourself and others and the places where you partnered with self-protection. Yeah. And the ways that you violated the law of love. Let's feel the impact of that. And none of it, not the good things made them better and not the destructive things made them worse.
Beautiful.
It just was a reality of facing the condition of their encounter and their engagement in their human experience. And
100%.
One of the things that I've been saying is like, there's a time one way or another that I believe we will face ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that the reason that the idea of that is scary is only because we have an intimate relationship with shame. But when the intimacy with shame doesn't exist there, it feels like a very freeing opportunity to have a matter-of-fact conversation. Like, I really want to understand the impact that I've had on others.
100%. It's that truth will set you free.
Yes.
Feeling.
Yes.
Yeah. I've had a thought that I've had about when we're going to get to heaven, will we see the reality of our life, whatever you want to put in there. But my thought that I have is it's like, you know, when you look through a microscope and you're just looking at that picture on the microscope and it's that like, you know, sort of granular image of whatever you're looking for. You're so close in it that you don't even know what it is.
Correct.
You're just like, oh, interesting shapes. And what my thought is like, I believe sort of like when our lives end or whatever, that it'll be like we'll see life as if we're coming out from the microscope like all of a sudden.
From the micro to the macro.
Yeah, like if I was looking at an orange, for example, like microscopically, I would see that. I wouldn't know that I was looking at an orange. But like all of a sudden I take a step back from that and then I'll be like, oh, that's an orange.
That's an orange.
And I think that
it's a tasty, delicious orange.
Totally. And just that feeling of like, oh, like I just see the reality of what that is.
Yeah.
And it feels clear to me. But that experience for us will be like how it is to see our lives.
Yeah.
But it will be like so just paired with that love and that feeling of like not being alone.
Yeah.
Inside of looking at the reality of our life that like you were saying that it will actually set us free in a way. Like the truth feels regulating. Like the truth feels like, oh, that's what it was. Like I see all of the things that I had missed before and now that I see it clearly, that makes sense. And there's like a relieving feeling that happens because of that. And so I'm always thinking in my own life, like anytime I connect to truth and pair it with love, I'm getting like a little bit closer to that experience a little bit. Like, what were you gonna say? Well,
I was going to say, like, I'm convinced, you know, like we can face ourselves then, or we can face ourselves now.
Yeah.
The beauty of if I engage facing myself now is that the healthy repercussions is that I may open up doorways to a lifestyle of living that I never knew I could access.
Yeah.
A lifestyle of love, a lifestyle of hope, a lifestyle of peace. Like, to me, this is a concept of the kingdom of heaven being at hand. Like, I actually get to encounter the kingdom of heaven when I am engaging in honest truth with myself, because I have now stepped into humility. I've stepped out. Like, to me, pride is this intimate relationship with shame that is denying the reality of my messiness because I feel so unworthy.
Yeah.
But humility is saying, I am trusting that I am lovable in the midst of my messiness, and I'm going to honestly participate in acknowledging these realities and get well acquainted with this right now.
Yeah.
And what it then does is it begins to bring liberation to you and the people all around you, because no longer do you have to perform. This is where you shatter performance and you begin to just go, I've messed up. And it's not just a dwelling on the negative things. Sometimes it's a dwelling on the beauty as well. I mean, that's an acknowledgement of a reality that many of us like don't ever allow ourselves to be like, I need to face the fact that I am bringing a lot of beautiful things into this world, that I've been unwilling to acknowledge the impact of love that I am having in all these simple ways where I am participating in surrendering and selflessness and kindness and thoughtfulness of others. And while doing that, I get to look at like, this is the messiness, the places where I'm disconnected from love and the repercussions. And all that to say, to wrap that up, you know, like even on my journey, like a couple months ago, I can't remember what it was, but I was sitting on the back porch smoking a cigar and listening to some, I can't remember what I was listening to, but something that was just like helping me kind of be meditative on my life. And all of a sudden I took out and I started writing a letter to Abby. And I said, I have greatly sinned against you. And the context of it, you know, was like, I was sitting there taking an account of the ways that I had deeply affected her negatively, you know, and it was from the perspective, like, there are so many interactions that Abby and I have had where it's reasonable, like not justifiable, but reasonable that you'd see a reaction like this, where maybe Abby initiates this type of behavior that's destructive. Then I go, all right, self-protector's up, I'm initiating this. And we get in a bad dance of a swirl of doing this back and forth to each other. And so often we can look at the participation of the other person, and it gets us lost in justifying, not reasoning, but justifying this stuff.
Oh, 100%.
Right. And so I took this whole side of Abby's participation and I set it all down on this giant shelving system in my heart. And I internalized and I said, but what's the truth of my participation? And what are the ramifications and the effects of these behaviors? Okay, in my fear, I sinned against you in these ways. And I stood in direct opposition to the realities of love. And so inside of that, you know, as I've been able to even like let go of judgments of my parents, because a lot of the behavior that was destructive in my marriage was a direct it was a direct recreation
100%
of the experiences that I had with my parents. 100%. And my survival skills kicked in. And now and for years, even back in the day, I would shame spiral when I did things. And I would go into, suicidal ideation really strong. Like, I can't believe I'm redoing this and I'm doing this thing that I never wanted to do. And now I'm hurting her. And I mean, that's even a conversation Abby recently brought up to me. I was like, I need to process the pain of how suicidal you went when you did that behavior.
Yeah.
And I felt so paralyzed and trapped inside of it. And
totally.
All that to say, again, for me, as I've been able to really see my parents' humanity and acknowledge the debt that's there in the ways that they did create debt, I've been able to see my humanity and acknowledge the ways that I've created debt, and just as a matter of fact say, and yes, I did this, and these are the repercussions of that and what you're dealing with. And that is liberty.
Yeah.
That is freedom for 100%.
all of us. 100%.
That is where we can breathe a sigh of relief, because we begin to get rid of all the things we have to protect.
100%.
We have to hide. We have to deny the exhaustive battles of that. And we just say like, yeah, I'm really messed up here.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, the truth sets you free and makes way for repair.
Yeah.
And what I hear even in your saying that is, so much of us resist acknowledging the truth.
Yeah.
But it's like the warmest hug you can get in the world, I think, is those moments of repair where I can be like, hey, like Kyle and I, my husband, have had so many conversations where I've been able to come to the table and be like, hey, this is where I have dropped the ball in this relationship. And this is where I have shown up exactly like the thing that I really struggle with within myself to have compassion on, but I just want to own to you the ways that I have hurt you. And then he is kind and generous and will often do the same back to me. And that experience is so healing.
It is.
To those core wounds inside of us. And so I always think when I rob myself of the truth, I'm robbing myself of the experience of repair.
Yeah.
Like I'm robbing myself of the experience of having that moment.
And, I've said this before, but we are all living in our own invisible hell on earth that we're very not conscious of, but it is these tormentors that are the subtle tormentors that are consistently bludgeoning us. Our relationship with that shame and that self-condemnation and that self-hatred and it comes out in so many aspects. And in humanity, once you start really seeing like, oh, we're all very tormented.
Yeah.
And there's an extended hand of love inviting us out of the torment, out of the death, out of the hell that's inside of our souls, into this type of peace and love and joy. But it comes at a price, right? It comes at facing this fear.
Yeah.
This fear that we have of, if I get honest with myself, then it means I'm that bad.
I'm unlovable.
Or it means that I'm unlovable. It means that I'm going to be abandoned. It means that I'm going to be alone. And it is so liberating to be able to go, okay, I've faced that fear and I'm not alone. And love still exists. And in fact, love usually gets turned up way more from 100%. People.
100%.
What people don't understand, even in some of the hardest environments, when someone lets down their armor and they begin to, without shame, just as a matter of fact, be like, no, I can see.
Yeah.
These are the effects that I have, and this is the way that I'm messy. People become tender towards that. They're shocked by that. So many people like,
it's healing for people.
How are you? I would never say that. How are you saying that? Oh my gosh. And they want to so many times, so often people want to actually cover that type of acknowledgement, like cover you, like nurture you or care for you or not leave you just exposed in it.
Yeah. Vulnerability is like inviting.
Yeah, it is.
You're vulnerable. People feel invited to respond to you vulnerably.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, hey guys, this has been amazing having this conversation with Rachel. I told you before, again, she's one of our master consultants in our life consulting masterclass. And she also is one of the faces that you get to see in Living Fully Alive, which right now we are open for business for Living Fully Alive.
It's the best.
It's the best.
Come hang out.
Thousands of people have been through that with friends and family, like I've said before. And if you really want to get connected to your heart and begin to build shame resilience inside of yourself and really get a new perspective on what love can look like, especially vulnerably exposing yourself within a community of people, our immersion program is a place for that to happen, where we have weekly experiences of dialogues like this and people like sharing their heart and getting repair inside of their heart as they're processing weekly. And they're getting to share with a community like, this is what's going on inside of me. And it's been something that I've watched people's lives just genuinely radically changed, story after story after story,
really
not just individualistically, but collectively between them and parents, and between parents and children, and friendship groups, finding repair, and then finding intimate long-term relationships. Like, we have people that have gotten married from our courses because they've been in this journey and they've cultivated this culture and they've really gotten connected to themselves, and they're finding a way to come alive in the midst of their humanity, in the midst of their messiness. And so that's happening right now at Justin and Abby. That's abi.com. You can go sign up for that class. Official class starts March 13th. Grab your seat now because we have limited seats for that. And Rachel, is there any way that you want people to contact you, or just hey, I'm Rachel, I'm here?
Hi, I'm Rachel, I'm here. Rachel Hughes Consulting is my Instagram.
Cool.
Which is probably the easiest way to see what I look like in real life.
Real life, Rachel.
Yeah, real life. And then if you have any questions or thoughts from this podcast, feel free to email me at the same, rachelhughesconsulting@gmail.com.
Great. And for those of you that want to hear a little snippet from a testimonial from Living Fully Alive, we got one for you right now. So there you go.
The most impactful thing would have been like things that you would have shared that impacted my view of things in the Bible. Forgiveness, for one, for sure. And also, I think the session on victim mentality. I feel like I was really able to grasp that concept, and like hearing it in depth helped me to really see that's something that I struggle with and I have been able to grow in now also. I've just been able to grow in showing up for myself in a loving way. It's encouraging to hear like my husband tell me like he can see change in my life. That feels big and all exciting for me. Like, I have a great community here, and I am telling all my friends, like, you need to take this, like, it will change you.
All right. Good. Bye.
Bye.